Before we jump into this absolute disaster unfolding between Trump and Canada, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, buy me a coffee. Link is over there. Because what I'm about to show you, nobody else has said it this clearly. Trump may have just triggered the biggest food crisis in modern US history, and he did it with one sentence.
A lot of it does come in from Canada, and so we'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to. Because that's the way you want to bolster here, and we can do it here. We can all do that here. But I would say what you do, you put very severe tariffs on from coming into other countries. You'll be making your own fertilizer very soon.
A few days ago, Donald Trump stood on stage and said the US doesn't need Canadian fertilizer. He said Americans should make their own. And immediately, economics, farmers, policy analysts, and honestly, even people who failed high school biology said, "Sir, what are you talking about?" Because this one threat doesn't just hurt Canada, it could collapse US agriculture, spike grocery prices, and destroy the same farmers Trump needs to win elections.
This week, Donald Trump threatened very severe tariffs on Canadian potash. It's a kind of fertilizer. Well, I have been deputized by the entire country to provide a response. And that response is, fucking do it, bud. Do it. Do it. We're ready. We can't wait. And here's why. Food crops do not care about nationalism. They care about potassium. Potash is potassium salt. It is critically important for growing things. Without potash, crops are weak. They're prone to infestation, and they won't be able to sustain the food production needs of an entire country. Taking potash away from American farmers would put farm operations across that country into bankruptcy and reduce the food supply to dangerous levels. The kind of levels, ironically, that if it were any other country we were talking about, we would probably be supplying aid to. Why? Because the US doesn't really have much of its own. Two countries won the Geological lottery for that, Russia and Canada. And we supply between 80 to 90% of what the US brings in each year. Of course, Trump doesn't understand potash, and we can't expect him to. It's a two-syllable word. But somehow he believes that gouging his own farmers for the material they need to feed the country will mean that American manufacturers will step in and make it domestically. But, and I can't believe that I have to explain this to the self-professed leader of the free world, but, sir, potash is not a car. You either have it under your feet in the soil or you don't. You cannot engineer geology. And Canada, Saskatchewan actually, is sitting on the largest and purest deposit in the world, the prairie evaporite. Incidentally, this is why Canadians cannot write off the US's threats of annexation as bluster. We own geological treasure, aluminum, cobalt, nickel, uranium, and they want it. We know from history America's policy on things it wants is step one, take it, by force if necessary. That's it, there's never a step two. So, since his planning team isn't particularly great with that whole long-term consequences thing, let's map this out for him. Trump adds, say, a 30% surcharge on American farmers who need to buy Canadian potash. Remember, that's how tariffs work. The farmers pay that, not Canada. 95% of American farms are small and family-owned. Those farmers already operate on razor-thin margins. This would put many of them, maybe most of them, into bankruptcy. There are more than 1.6 million of those family farms in the US. If even 10% of them falter, that is enough to crash the insurance system in that market. Just ask anyone from Florida's coastline how easy it is to get home insurance these days. The larger operations, of course, would try to keep up, but even they live and die by input costs. A 40% spike on something as basic as potassium is not a haircut, it's a guillotine. They would slash planting, delay upgrades, and cut whatever staff they have left after Trump's immigration goons have taken them. And then it reaches the citizens. Lower yields means less food, higher prices at the grocery store, and even more of its people going hungry. America would be punishing its own food system and starving its own people to make a point about a mineral it doesn't even have.
One mainstream reported yesterday was surface level stuff. But here's what they didn't tell you. Canada supplies a massive portion of the fertilizer the US depends on. Without it, American farmers from Iowa to Nebraska to Kansas start shutting down. And the US cannot replace this supply, not in 1 year, not in 10 years, because Americans' own nitrogen production is aging, expensive, and operating at maximum capacity. This is not a negotiation tactic. This is a self-inflicted agricultural grenade. Remember 2018? Trump slapped tariffs on China. China retaliated. Farmers went bankrupt. Soybeans sat rotting in silos, and Washington had to write billion-dollar bailout checks like report cards. Well, 2025 is shaping up to be worse because now US farmers aren't just battling tariffs, they are battling labor shortages, ICE crackdowns, and collapsing export markets all at the same time. In the last few months alone, ICE raids wiped out workforces in major farming states, crops were rotting, farmers were begging the government to back off because they literally could not harvest their fields. Meanwhile, China increased soybean purchases from Brazil again, leaving American farmers with overflowing storage and plunging prices. And the beef saga, South Korea and China boosted imports from Australia, bypassing the US completely. So when Trump threatens Canadian farmers too, farmers aren't just nervous, they are terrified. And here is where everything flips. Canada isn't cornered, Canada isn't scared. Canada is ready. Because while Trump was making threats, Canada spent the last few months signing fertilizer, grain, and energy agreements with countries that desperately need supply. India, Brazil, UAE, Japan, the European Union.
Donald Trump says that he is considering putting very severe tariffs on Canadian fertilizer, and we can only assume that he is talking about potash, which mainly comes from Saskatchewan. Canada is the world's largest supplier of potash, and the United States gets about 90% of their potash from Canada. It is theoretically impossible for the United States to replace Canadian potash. It just can't happen. The only places in the world that are capable of replacing some of Canada's potash exports to the United States are Belarus, which the United States has heavily sanctioned, so it is illegal for farmers to import potash from Belarus. And the other option is Russia. And I will add that it is extremely expensive to ship potash across the ocean. What's really going to happen is U.S. farmers are going to end up paying Donald Trump's tariffs. If the farmers don't go bankrupt in the process, Donald Trump at some point may offer them a bailout, similar to the bailout that Trump gave today to farmers for $12 billion because they are already suffering as a result of Trump's tariffs. Listen, Donald Trump is a fucking idiot. Canadian potash cannot be replaced. All that's going to happen is Donald Trump is going to hurt U.S. farmers. The United States economy is near a breaking point. For reference, last month, Canada added over 50,000 jobs to our economy. The United States, with a population nearly 9 times the size of Canada, lost about 32,000 jobs. That's what we know so far. All of the United States' economic problems can be attributed to 2 things: Donald Trump and tariffs.
In other words, if the US shuts the door, Canada now has 5 more doors wide open. This is the strongest position Canada has ever had in a US trade fight. So while Trump thinks he is punishing Canada, he's actually pushing Canada deeper into global markets and leaving American farmers isolated.
A key ingredient in American-grown food, potash, now threatened by U.S. tariffs.
A lot of it does come in from Canada, and so we'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to.
President Donald Trump's latest warning to Canada's fertilizer industry, saying it would bolster his country's own production that lags far behind Canada's.
You need to take the president very seriously, but maybe don't take him literally on everything that he says.
Potash is one of 3 critical nutrients that crops need. The United States produces about 400,000 tons of potash annually and imports millions of tons more from Canada. The U.S. is our biggest buyer.
I just don't think there's any way you could scale that capacity up tenfold in the matter of a few months, because seeding starts for them in February in the southern U.S.
So the Wonton Don has threatened that he may put severe tariffs on Canadian potash going into the U.S. I know a producer who is calling this out, saying that it's going to crush U.S. farmers with higher costs and potentially even lower yields. So potash, which is K in NPK fertilizer, is mainly sourced from two locations, Western Canada and Russia. The US imports nearly 13 million tons of Canadian potash every year. If they want to replace that, they're going to have to build new mines. New mines take a long time, as we see with the BHP Jensen project, which is not even going to become fully operational until 2027. If you skip using potash fertilizer, your yields could tank. If you use it at the tariff cost, your costs are going to skyrocket. Overall, it's bad. Now, Trump also announced a subsidy payment to farmers. This is just a band-aid solution. You're keeping input costs high in the US while not actually expanding your potash capacity production in America. We know that when we create more expensive food with more expensive fertilizer, consumers eat the bill. In Canada, when we put a 25% import tariff on US goods like orange juice, beef, other goods, we saw an increase at the grocery store. Consumers eat the bill, not importers. Now, it would make sense if there was an American alternative to this production for Trump, but there is not. You're jacking up the price of a raw input where no alternatives exist.
We've probably seen the viral videos, farmers on TikTok and Instagram calling out Trump directly. We can't plant without fertilizer. We can't harvest without workers. We can't sell soybeans China doesn't want. We can't ship beef nobody is buying. This isn't politics anymore. This is survival. And the world is watching. Economists are now warning that Trump's fertilizer threats could increase the US grocery prices by 6 to 12%, spike corn and wheat prices, reduce beef supply, and trigger panic buying, and finally hit the poorest Americans the hardest. A tariff that was supposed to punish Canada is about to punish American families. But here is the twist. Canada is actually benefiting from Trump's tantrums. The global fertilizer market is tighter than ever. Countries want stability, and Canada has become the calm, reliable supplier. So every time Trump lashes out, Canada becomes more valuable on the world stage. This isn't about fertilizer. This is about the future of the US-Canada relationship. For the first time ever, Canada doesn't need the US markets to survive a trade war. But the US absolutely needs Canada to keep food prices stable. If Trump goes ahead with these tariffs, he's not hurting Canada. He's detonating the US agricultural system from the inside. This story is developing fast, and I'll keep you updated with every twist. Let me know in the comments, do you think Trump will actually go through with this, or is this just another political grenade tossed into a very dry field? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and buy me a coffee to support the channel. More shocking updates coming soon. So YouTube thinks you like this video over here. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Over.